We out here, folks. Hello, everyone. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties. I am Juff. This is Duke and Cole. We're going to do another Q&A here. We're waiting on one little thing. Sorry, today was kind of a whirlwind for Rari and I, so...
It had nothing to do with me.
It was all your fault, actually.
Yeah. Project deadlines.
Oh, okay. So Rari has flagged some questions for us now because they said it's been a whirlwind. It's been kind of nuts with the announcement and me having to do a bunch of stuff to try to, fix account login and whatnot. So we're gonna get started here with some questions for the week. Just a quick introduction because I forgot. As I said, I'm Juff. This is Duke and Cole. The server is launching. The Dalaya Dev Team. The server is launching on September 27th, sometime in the afternoon EST. We'll let you know when sooner rather than later, hopefully. But let's get this show started. And the first thing we've got here, the first question we've got comes from Alarcon, and it says, "Can we bring back a two-handed ability for knights? Maybe even something that in different effects depending on two-hand slash, two-handed blunt, or two-handed pierce." And I was asking this question for Duke to answer, and now he's got a phone call. So, I'm going to give Duke a moment to get off the phone. Take a sip of water while I wait.
Can you reread it for me? Because I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah. Can we bring back a two-handed ability for knights? Maybe even something that in different effects depending on two-handed slash, two-handed blunt, or two-handed pierce.
Good. All right, so the initial discipline.
Good.
You're good. Okay. So the initial discipline system was just like a template, right? To try to create basic things in each field with the intent that they would be added to later. So absolutely, yeah.
The only thing I was going to say is they're asking if we can do things that have different effects depending on two-hand slash, two-hand blunt, or two-handed pierce. Like, we can, but it's much easier to just add something. It'd be much easier to add something for two-handed slash versus two-handed blunt versus two-handed pierce than it is to add one thing that does stuff for everything. Like, it's possible. It's just much more work.
Yeah, Juff had commented that he doesn't like limiting certain weapons to, or certain abilities to weapon types.
I think it's fine within reason. I think the issue only really stems up when you put something that's like supposed to be super, like a super pillar of your class, right? Where it's supposed to be like a really powerful section of your class when that's weapon limited. I think that's a problem. But if it's something like you have a couple different two-handed abilities that do different things, I don't think it's a huge deal. But like I said, I was asking this question because Duke and I were talking about Paladin stuff today, and then he got a phone call. So,
well, let's just shelf it and then move on to the next one. Then we'll be coming to it. Kind of like you're creating your character on like Fallout, and you're moving them back and forth, just getting it right. He's spinning in his chair.
All right, so this next question comes from Brims, and it says, "There's been talk of debuffs being displayed on enemies and some discussion about tracking the duration and Charm and Charm and Mez possibly being one of the factors in those being shown hidden. Is there a chance we could see them coming back on the new server?"
We don't have to show Charm, so...
Yeah, like as far as I'm concerned, showing the other ones is great, and... we could even just, use a dummy duration on Charm if we wanted to and just show the full duration no matter what, and then they just have to deal with it. So, yeah, like I would like to have them in. It's not a thing right now, but definitely something
Do you think on raid targets it's just like, does it help? I mean, if you've got 45 debuffs or whatever.
On raid targets, it's still useful. It's a little less useful, but definitely like in smaller group content, it helps a ton, right?
So would it be more important to see all debuffs or just your own?
I don't know. I don't actually know what...
like what is a better quality of life?
I think it depends what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
I think
you're the raid leader.
Yeah, I mean, this is why a lot of modern MMOs give you the option between the two, right? Like, show only my debuffs, or show only the enemy's debuffs. So
we could probably do that. with a command. Perhaps.
Yeah, that would probably be an option.
I'm back.
Welcome back. It's funny. I'd queued up a softball question for you, and then you answered the phone.
Oh, did I miss an important one then?
No, we shelved it for a moment.
Okay.
But yeah, adding the debuffs showing up is definitely something that I would like, and I don't think anyone really, outside of Mez and Charm, I don't really think there's any reason we couldn't show it, and there are enough ways we could hide that or make it a dummy that I don't think it's a big deal. So I'm going to go back to the other one I had just had open. Duke.
All right,
question?
softball me.
This question is from Alarcon and said, can we bring back a two-handed ability for knights? Maybe even something that has different effects depending on two-hand slash, two-hand blunts, and two-hand pierce.
Oh my goodness. You'll never believe what I was just working on today, guys. It was a two-handed discipline for paladins. So yeah, that'll be in the works soon, and hoping to get that done by tomorrow.
So, yeah. We have a new... I mean, do you want to talk about what it does, or do you want to just move on?
I will say it's a pretty decent damage boost. A little bit of threat, but it would be more damage than threat, I think, is what we're going for here.
Okay. Gonna move to the next petition now, if it'll let me. I should probably close these instead of just leaving them open with benefit. You know what? I don't actually know how, so I'm just gonna move on. Okay, this question comes from Matt Demon. It says, hello, super excited to be getting back into EQ and Dalaya, whatever. You all have done an amazing job over the years, and I cannot wait to make more great memories in the game we all love. Our friends and I really enjoyed adept farming for gear as we level. Will adepts remain in the game at launch? Will they be the same NPCs? Follow up, have you considered their spawn to be unique to user groups rather than share with everyone, to avoid competition? This is the difficult question. So we'll start with yes, adepts are in the game. But adepts are one of those things that are kind of a problem in that they're cool and they're fun and a lot of people like them, so we want them to be here. But if we make their spawns too fast, people are incentivized just to sit there forever to try to farm everything, which we don't want. So there's a pretty fine line between making these a thing you can do and making these a thing you feel like you have to do. And any way we tweak that just shifts that balance to where you feel like you have to do it. So you have to be very careful about making them too fast where you're just going to be, everyone is going to be like, oh, we'll just sit here at, Ironhide or whatever, kill this 20 times and then move on. Do it to the next one, farm every single piece of gear. Move to the next one, farm every single piece of gear. And we don't necessarily want to incentivize that. So, like I said, it's a very fine line between people want to kill these and people feel like they absolutely have to kill them. We've had, 10 discussions about this in the last 4 months. Whoa, is Fuwak actually here?
Oh. It's Fuwak. Oh my god.
Does this shit work?
Yeah, hi Fuwak.
My camera's not showing, but hey fellas.
How's it going, Juan?
Pretty good. I'm at the racetrack, but I figured I'd check in.
Were you winning, son?
Okay, I'm pushing the 3 guest button, but it did, but it's just showing me. So I'm going to go back to two guests because it's just showing my dummy account there. But yeah, we were just talking about adepts.
Well, luckily I showed up right in time.
We were just discussing the fact, I was discussing the fact that adepts are like sort of a difficult situation where we need to, we need them to be, we want them to be cool and fun, but not players to not feel like they have to farm them forever.
Unfortunately, it's a really fun situation that people like a lot, but obviously the goal is to cluster the players at the top tier. So, I mean, if you see one and it's there, you got to kill it, but you shouldn't wait for it.
Okay, so what do we got here next? I am looking in the wrong place. Okay, this is from Susvane, and it says, will the new server be using the most current SOD codebase? Are there any particular patch changes from recent years in SOD that are being specifically rolled back or omitted? I think that's a cold question, so...
I mean, it is the code base for SOD.
Yeah, I
Other
definitely...
things being rolled back. Nothing like architecturally, or you know what I mean. Everything just it's a mess from like 2009, right? Different people working on it. Different syntax styles. What's the question like specifically? Maybe you can...
Basically, is there anything from the old patch notes that is there that's specifically being rolled back? And I can't think of anything like specific. I mean, if there is, it's going to be something like, you know, we rolled back some specific class change and not like we rolled back something huge.
I mean, we rolled back packet loss.
I can't think of anything that comes, like nothing comes to mind.
No, not the weapon crunch, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's going to be some work on weapon stuff eventually. Like some of it got done, a little bit of it got done in the monk rework, but yeah. All right.
I think you were just always continually moving forward. You know what I mean? So
yeah. Okay, let's see what we got here next. Okay, here is one, which is, are reworked tier 1 and tier 2 mobs able to drop ancient spells? Yes, that hasn't changed. The whole goal of this change is just that in the long run, after the initial few weeks, realistically, the value of those mobs gets lower and lower. So by making them 6-mans, the hope is that if you're a newer player showing up, or if you're a more casual player, you'll be able much more easily just form a group and go kill it, rather than it being like, oh, I'm a tier 1 player, I need to somehow acquire like 13 people to go kill these, or 14 people to go kill these. It'll just be, if you got a couple friends, or you know, you don't mind trying to form a group in OOC, the goal is that you should be able to form a group and go kill it relatively easily, instead of them just being something that basically only exists for, you know, people to duo to get their alt and ancient every once in a while. So the goal is to just make them more accessible for the people who they're sort of there for.
And I personally adjusted these. If they turn out to be overtuned, we're going to dial them back. The idea is accessibility.
Okay. This is kind of a number crunchy one. It says, can you delve into racial bonuses a little more to make them clear? Are racial bonuses like 1% melee crit, barbarians 1% melee crit, erudites 1% spell crit, additive or multiplicative? Will a rogue barbarian be able to crit melee attacks at level 1, or they need to have some crit before it kicks in? Gnome's bonus to proc rate is that 3% basically nothing except on high proc rate items. Does erudites 1% spell crit affect healing and offensive spells? Okay, so generally speaking, for things that are a percentage increase, it's something you can get a percent of in game, so something like spell crit or melee crit, it is just +1. However, the exception is things that are skill mods. So if it's something like dodge or parry, those are multipliers to your parry skill. So if you have 250 parry skill, you get 1% of that. If you have 250 dodge skill, you get 1% of that. As for the Gnome's bonus to proc rate, it's 3% on your whatever your proc chance is. So if your proc chance is 5%, it's 5 times 1.03. So it's not huge or anything. Think about the fact I think Proctome is 10%, so it's like a third of a Proctome. It's not nothing, but it's not a huge deal. And as for the erudite spell crit, is only offensive spells. Okay, moving on to the next one. Okay, so this is a Duke question. With Leaga Malath, will it be possible for non-Froglocks to enter at start to do the quest lines? Will it be tied to alignment deity in any way? What's the expected level range for the content there? 1 to what?
Okay, so anyone can go to Leaga Malath. It's not, no one's going to stop you going there. It's not like Rob, where you're going to get hit for being a high elf or whatever. Let's see. In terms of the quests, some of the very basic newbie quests can be done by anyone. There are special quests for the Froglock Shadow Knights, rogues, and then necromancers, though. And let's see. The content for that quest spans probably, I'd say, like levels, 1 through 18, 19, somewhere around there. It won't take too long, I don't think. But the entire area of Leaga Malath and the harbor next door is 1 through 20, I believe.
Yeah, when Rory and I beta tested it, we did everything, and it took us till about level 19 to do all the quests and bug hunt for you and test a bunch of stuff out. So,
yeah. Well, Juff, did you have a good time there?
Yeah, for the most part, we generally enjoyed it. There's a lot of mobs. I mean, we told you about the handful of issues we ran into, and you adjusted most of them. So I think most of those should be fixed. And most of them are small things like, the level range on these mobs is too high, so you get a bunch of gray cons next to a bunch of red cons, but most of it was just, was just fine.
There's a lot of mobs there too. So if you feel like you're not going to have enough people in there or enough time to kill things in there, you will have plenty of things to kill.
Right, and we announced this, or we talked about this before, and I talked about it a little bit today, but in all of the starter zones at launch, there's going to be some dynamic spawning stuff going on to try to make sure there's enough mobs for people to kill in the low-level zones. It's only going to be in the starter zones, the starter zones and the starter dungeons, so you're going to probably stop running into it around like level 20, but up until then, there's going to be a bunch of dynamic spawning to make sure you guys have stuff to kill. Sunday, we're going to be doing some testing on it to make sure it works and see, if it needs tuned up or tuned down, but yeah. So yeah. Gonna go on to the next. Alrighty. Okay. This is from Kissable, and it says, firstly, love all the previews and changes so far. Can you please clarify how much endurance we should expect to have? I see the Beast Lord change reference 155 at the top end, but I have no frame of reference to an endurance pool total. So a completely maxed out character, so 65 with 335 stamina, has 4,860 endurance regardless of class. A fresh 65 who's got very little gear is going to have 3,000 some. And then you'll more or less have about 3K, 3,200, something like that when you get 65, and you'll slowly grow to 4.8K. And remember, all of those costs are reduced by like Ancient Sahala's region, stuff like that will reduce the cost of those. So it says 155. If you have full buffs, it's going to be, 60% of that. So it's going to be like 95. That ability that he's mentioning in particular is like designed to be very, very low cost. So okay, what do we got here now? Oh, this is actually an interesting one, because this one's probably going to cause some fighting. What are the team's general philosophy on class balance going forward? Which classes do you intend to be the highest DPS? How big should the gaps between classes be? Do you want a trade-off between class utility and DPS, or should all classes be on a relatively level ground? The same question also could be applied to tanks and healers, but I feel we were getting a decent idea on them through the class previews. So I have a lot to say about this, but before I just start going off the deep end, I'm going to give you guys a chance to speak, because I could talk about this for hours.
People, you go first.
Cole, do you have anything?
You want me to go first? I don't really. I'm probably more in line with Marza with crazy ideas that don't really belong in an EverQuest emulator, and they get vetoed.
That's probably fair. What about you, Duke?
Multi-class.
I mean, in my head, there is this balance of utility and DPS. But in reality, it's more of like it kind of gradually goes up with each other. Especially with how like enchanters were in the past. Obviously, that's not going to be like that, but what am I thinking?
You mean enchanters doing 4,000 personal DPS isn't going to keep happening?
Wow, interesting. Yeah, probably just with like lowly utility classes, like I guess rogues and wizards, rangers to a point. Like those are what I would see as high DPS classes, and meanwhile, in my head, as a necromancer, I just want necromancers to do as much damage as possible and still have their utility.
So it's kind of complicated because let's say you're gonna make a game from scratch, right? You have no constraints. That's this game is quite unique in that it is an EverQuest emulator. So that's kind of the first expectation people have in their mind when they begin playing the game. And then it has 15, 20 years of history in this server. So that's the other expectation everybody has. And if, say, like, you know, I existed for a short window of time in the past for like maybe 2 years, then came back, then I believe that leads to, you know, more out of the box thinking or things that stray from those constraints, right? And so that tends to kind of like, this class is historically a simple class to play. Well, if you make it complicated, then that, you know, it gets change, you know, small changes versus a lot of changes. It's tough. Like utilities baked into the client, I think, right? Like invisibility. But if you give everybody invis clicks, then, you know, how do you add that utility back to a specific class? Levitate is a utility, I think. We think of utility as just resistances, debuffs. What really just comes down to, like, if you give everybody a resist buff, that's just effective health, right? Or if you're debuffing their resistances, that's just damage. So is that utility? What really is utility? A flashlight in a horror game, maybe?
Yeah.
I like the existential take on it.
Yes. Everyone's blinded and you get a flashlight or a lantern. You can't see it till you have it. Or class gives you a... Grickles will have that as soon as they get that lighting stuff working.
Dark Zone is just completely pitch black until you have a...
Oh yeah, I could totally ramble.
Hey, it's called Bleak Blind for a reason.
Which I have to rename, so it's a big checklist.
I mean, what, do you have anything to say about class balance?
I actually think it's pretty good, and I'm really excited about the current changes. I really like and trust the current dev team. I think they're doing a great job.
Okay, well, I'm going to try not to go too far here. Like, generally, my personal feelings are that classes that provide damage in the form of not just damage, so things like debuffs, buffs, should probably do less raw damage than the classes who don't do that, right? So if you bring something like an enchanter who's providing the entire raid damage in things like curses, shared mind, buffing people, they should do less damage than the classes who show up and only do damage. But it should be close enough that you're not in this weird scenario where it's like, we have an enchanter, bringing a second enchanter is so much worse personal damage, even when you include their like utility, that we never want to bring a second enchanter. Like, in my mind, the goal should be the first enchanter you always want. The second one is nice to have, might even be optimal in some scenarios, but it shouldn't be like, oh, we want 3 enchanters in every raid, or any more than 1 enchanter is just dead. Like, I don't want either of those scenarios. Like, ideally, you know, if you said to me, I build every one of my raids by trying to get 1 of every class in that raid if I can, And I know that's kind of a long shot. Like, I don't necessarily think that's realistic. But if that's what you said to me is what you wanted, like, I would be happy. Like I said, I don't know that that's really feasible, but like that to me, it would be like perfect. So they asked the same questions about tanks and healers, which is a bit more difficult to answer. So I'll say this. We are aware of this fact that at the end of the old server, tank balance is really out of whack, where basically knight scaling had just gotten so high that the baseline bonuses that warrior got defensively over knights no longer really mattered. A lot of it had to do with how block scales, where block just gets essentially increasingly strong as you go up the tiers. Like a low tier character gets like 3% block from wearing a shield, whereas a high tier character gets 10% block from wearing a shield. And the defensive bonuses that a warrior gets over a knight are only like 7%. So when a knight has, 3% more avoidance, and a warrior only has a little bit more damage reduction, we're talking 6 to 7%, it gets really, really close. And with it being that small, it just kind of becomes, well, why use a warrior, right? Like their threat's more annoying to deal with. Like they do a little more damage, but not so much that it really makes a huge difference. So unless you have a guy who really wants to play a warrior, like they didn't have a great niche. And that's one of those things that we're going to be hopefully dealing with in the next week or two. Just trying to basically put a cap on block in some way so it's not so egregious at the high end. Because up until about, tier 8 or 9, it's not really an issue. Maybe even tier 10 or 11. It's not until you start getting into the 110, 120 AC shields where stuff starts really breaking. So we'll figure something out here the next little bit and hopefully have it in before launch.
So if you think that there's
cast spells while wearing plate armor.
Sure. And then healers are an even... I'm not going to do healers now too, because that's also a very difficult question to answer. Because healers have the issue of utility, essentially, right? Where it's just like... The big difference between healers is supposed to be the amount of utility they provide, both in a raid and a group, and it's a mess. So that's another hour on its own. So I'm just going to move on to something else. Oh, also, I think I forgot to say that petition was from Valen, Bahln. You want to find another question?
I think some of those differences have to revolve around theme, right? Like
sure.
Role-playing aspect of the world you play in or whatever.
Vitaly asked the same question that I just answered apparently earlier, so I'm not the one about racial, so I'm just going to move on from that one. This is a good one, actually. This is from Stever from 829. It says, has there been any consideration to lowering some of the planar spawn times from 7 days to a more reasonable 3 to 5 day window? So I already did that. So that's been done. They've been moved to match the stuff around them, so they're not, a bajillion 7 days versus 4. So that's the thing that's already happened. Anything that was originally buffed up to that, which was all of the planes in Sepulchre of Darkness. I think that's it. There might have been another. I pulled all of the mobs that had been set to that, and wasn't adjusted other level ones. That's for 2 reasons. One, there's going to be a lot of congestion, people fighting over mobs as the game progresses. Because realistically, there's going to be probably 2 to 3 guilds fighting at the very top. And there's probably usually 1 guild sort of rises up, and then you've got 2 to 3 below that fighting over stuff. And then I'm expecting there to maybe even be another 2 guilds below that fighting over stuff. So that's going to cause a lot of congestion in the plains. So by going back to 4-day, the hope is that it should alleviate that a bunch. It's also part of helping with some of the everquest stuff by making those shorter timers. It'll be a little less annoying to fight for some of the raid mob stuff. Okay, this one's from yesterday, which is funny, which is Is there any plans to let people create a character early? It'd be nice to lock in names, or if we could make UI adjustments beforehand, it'd be amazing. So some of that is obviously happening. You'll be able to make a UI this weekend, but there's not really a great way for us to let you log in and make names. Like that's the one that there's not really a great solution for. So
like you could make a UI and then just rename it to the character, correct? After the
yes, and they could also just log in on Sunday during the test and do it as well. So because if you make, if your character's name is Dave and you make a UI and then the character gets deleted and you rename your character Dave, the UI will be the same. So at the minimum, you can do that.
I think there's got to be a lot of competition for Dave now.
I took very generic names, so
That's it. I'm doing it right now. I'm taking it.
I was going to say, I'm going to leave Fuak behind. I'm going to become Dave.
King Dave.
I keep forgetting to say who petitions are from. That was Shroud. Oh, that was Sustain. This one's Sustain. My wife moved it already, so I don't know. I'm sorry. This one is from Sustain, which it says, will the changes to leveling skills that are baked into the new client be kept for the new server? So those aren't actually baked into the client. Those are, we can control skill ups, and we don't use the live skill up system. The live skill up system, from what I know, is random. Ours isn't actually an experience system where you get XP when you do things. But Duke can talk a little bit more about this.
Sorry, I'm working on the thing that's happening Sunday, and I missed what you said.
What? Talk about skill ups.
Oh, they're going to be better. They're going to be faster. They're going to be stronger. They're not going to be like other servers where you level them up like the second that you swing something. You're not going to get a level up. It's going to take a little bit more time, but it's going to take a much faster time than before. And let's say you're doing something like you have a two-hander and you don't replace that two-hander from level 1 to 40. You have a lot of skill, a lot of a skill gap in between there. That is going to be increased by, I believe, up to half of that skill is going to be increased by twofold. I believe that's what we did.
I don't.
And then it should be something along those lines.
You're 50 points away to be 3 times as fast, and then it scales up to 25, I think, something like that. So the catch-up mechanic.
I created a vanilla character recently who has no skills, and fighting level 65 mobs, it rockets up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the goal there is to make it so that if you're a high level character trying to catch something up, it shouldn't be a big deal. But it also just we don't want it to be like you hit level, let's say it's level 20. We don't want it to be you hit level 21 and your skill just instantly maxes out, because it feels kind of weird. It just it doesn't really feel like your character's getting stronger. It just feels like at that point, it feels like, why have a skill? Like we could just set the number every time you leveled. It doesn't really make a ton of sense. So.
Then when you have a random conjuration skill when you're a cleric that you gotta level up because you got a level 20, you're not gonna spend 3 hours trying to level that back up to where it should be. It should be 5 minutes at most.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, we want upgrades to feel good, exciting.
I think when Rari and I were testing some stuff out, she hit level 17 in her warrior, I think it was, and got dual wield or his double attack. She got something. By the time she was level 18, it was basically maxed out. So, it was 85 points behind or something, and it was maxed out within a level. So it wasn't bad at all. Like I said, the goal is just to make it so that if you're behind, it's not a horrible, painful, but you just don't. It also still feels like the skill system has some meaning instead of it just being your skills effectively always maxed out. Okay. This is a question for Fuwak, basically. Bango says, Q&A needs more trolls, please and thank you.
What?
Bango says the Q&A needs more trolls.
Oh, well, great. Look,
I'm
trolls are an underrepresented race. If you're thinking about creating a character, you should create a troll. They're better than everyone thinks. They're large and green. I recommend it. I'm going to make 2. You should make several.
At least 4.
Trust only trolls.
I'm gonna. Rari, do we have any more questions that are flagged, or am I just free to start reading chat stuff? So my chat is like
She said
showing.
troll face.
Okay, I got to start opening the chat.
Ego is unclean and he should be punished.
Well, that's what happens when you go on a cruise.
That is true. He did go on a cruise, which was, a mistake. It is always a pain for me to see the chat when it's. Give me a second. I'm trying to find. Hey, dang it! There are just too many.
We had a question about. It was. Let's see if I can find it. Will there be consideration for old characters? I know no one wants alien name because they're gonna get a lot of hate tales. But if someone purposely jacks a name of a well-known person, will that be petitionable? And I had responded, yes, that would be.
One moment, I gotta mute for a second. My wife is coming to speak to me.
Sure.
Chat. I can't read it. Just close.
So there's been a lot of conversation internally about that, names, people with old names. And I'm kind of the opinion that we would just kind of handle it on a case-by-case scenario and just ask everybody to be, I don't know.
I can hear it twice right now because I'm in it on yours.
Adults don't make it work harder for us.
We're hoping for go along to get along. Don't take anybody's name, please.
I would say you can pick any name you want, and then if someone petitions and change, and then as time goes on, it's gonna be like in 3 years. That's kind of less. This is like only right in the beginning transition, I'd imagine.
The laws of adverse possession apply. If you had this name for 7 years, it was now.
Yeah, basically.
Okay, sorry about that. So yeah, I mean, they covered it basically. Just don't make our life hard. If you're intentionally stealing someone's name to be a jerk, don't do it, because you're just going to make things difficult for us, and we're going to be upset with you.
All right, here's a question. What is the balance timeline like? If some classes suck at the start, will you be hesitant to buff at the low end? That's from Nas or Relvos.
Yeah, so Skies, I would say that at the very beginning, like for the first, let's say the first probably 3 months, unless there's something that's really underperforming, right? If you've got something that's doing a third of the damage of another class, or I should say a third of the damage of most classes, that would get looked at. If you're doing 10% less than other things, that's probably not going to get looked at. We shifted a lot of the power from the low end that had been added back over the years into higher tier like AAs and stuff. So there's going to be some classes now where your AAs are more impactful. When you go to get your special class AAs, you're going to get a lot more power out of them. So, like I said, if there's something that's really egregiously broken, it'll get looked at. But if it's just like, I do a little less damage than that guy, we're going to wait until your AAs start kicking in, people start getting gear, and see what stuff actually looks like.
Yeah, and there's been like...
I don't think you're stranded with no battle. I mean, we can patch. We could patch tomorrow if we want.
I mean, we actually kind of need to patch tomorrow, but...
Oh yeah, we probably do. There's been like 5 billion ideas, and everybody had to not use their class ideas because we had to hurry up for launch. So after launch, everyone's gonna be like, okay, you remember that idea we had? Can we do that now? So like Mage had a really big design idea that we were like, okay, we need to wait 2 of them actually. So
yeah,
like, is the class going to get balanced? We might not balance the class. We might first implement the ideas that we had.
Yeah, we had some more interesting things to do with mage pets that were just like, this is going to take a lot of work. We don't have time. We need to move on. Like one of the issues with the mage in particular is we need to figure out what to do with their what are they called? The stance AAs. Not because we dislike them, they're cool, but we need them to not be stances. And because they're currently all in a row, like in a one after the other in the AA window, it's actually kind of hard to solve that problem. Because we would just normally turn them into buttons. But because they're one in a row, that's a little weird. So that's one of the things we need to solve. See, now that I have access to the chat, I'm going to scroll up. Thorheim asked if sense heading is max at start, and yeah, it still is.
Yes. I would like to unnerf pickpocket. Because I'm afraid of pull.
Oh, that would
die.
take some time to like.
Yeah. Pro gate out.
Like, pickpocket, they can steal any item that's not magic, right?
Yeah.
So it's very dangerous for droppable items if they're not magic.
The meters do not currently work. They may work in the future, possibly. Not saying they will, because I don't know. That's going to be an internal discussion, but it is not something that's like a lot of those things we have to turn on and make like function. We have to actually add the code to tell the server to send you the data. So,
I would want that to happen personally.
Is that part of the client, the threat meter?
That's what I was told.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't messed with it, but
that'd be kind of cool.
Nice. There
Is
might
that-
be a bit of it in the
I always
code.
like not knowing.
I thought the mark NPCs work. Yeah, I thought those work. We gave everybody those.
I think they got this. I don't know.
Wait.
I don't know.
Not in the group right now, so I can't tell you.
Like a lot of that stuff could be made to work. It's a question of like looking at it, figuring out what it is, how we can enable it, what we want, etc., etc.
And I have to do like X target stuff like that. Target.
Better.
What about pickpocket being like its own loot table, like forage, right?
I mean, I think that would be the best solution.
I know there's some mobs out there hidden among everything that can do that right now, which is kind of fun, but you'll have to figure all that out for yourselves.
Yeah, because we have a scripted Lua pickpocket, right? So you can do Lua pickpocket and spawn stuff.
Yeah, it doesn't event.
Okay, that's what I thought. I don't know, Olian. It's one of those things where like we have to mess around with it. It's just weird. Like I don't know how well like the client supports you getting multiple buttons from the same AA. Like I haven't messed around with it, and I don't know. Because like my general understanding of how it works is you make an AA, it has a button, you click the hotkey to get the button, it gives you the button for whatever the skill is. I don't know how you would do like if we had 4 ranks of it, how do I give each rank a different button? I have no idea. Oh, actually, after reading your question, that's kind of all what we do. That's kind of what we already do with the mage runic pets, actually, where the pet that's summoned is based on what form you're in when you summon it. So it's just kind of that in reverse. I mean, that's possible. What is your name? Gene Ball. But that's there's some oddities with it just because of how like those are all supposed to have a shared cooldown, which I don't know if we can do shared cooldowns with AAs. Cool.
Shared AAs.
Shared AA cooldowns. So like if we give them multiple AAs could they share a cooldown?
Yeah.
Those
Like all
Because they're-
the harm touches. I'll say share cooldown.
Yeah,
We didn't add the unique AA cooldown where like I don't believe. There's some work to do with AAs internally.
Okay. Because if we, like that would be obviously the easiest solution for that mage AA, so we could just get rid of it. Or not get rid of it, but like make it not be stances and make it just be AA buttons instead. So yeah.
Well, it will be AAs, yeah, because they don't have the combat window or anything.
Yeah.
Like that, so
I don't want to ad-lib too much, but do we want to talk about the idea of fighting harder mobs?
I mean, that is, yeah, we should probably talk about it. So like in general, our goal is to try to incentivize you to fight harder things rather than fighting a bunch of easy things. So we're going to be making, like, some of this is already being worked on behind the scenes, but the goal is going to be make harder things more rewarding, make the things that are way too rewarding for how easy they are less rewarding. So basically try to make a balance where, like, if you're tier a bajillion, you're not incentivized to go fight Kesora for 1,000 years. We want there to be some actual variety in things you do. It's like we don't want Kesora to be terrible. We don't want this to be a zone you never go to. But we also don't want Kesora to be the best XP zone for literally ever, because there's just so many mobs in it, which is, the essentially the problem with Kesora is it's just so densely packed, and the mobs are so easy you can just pull 1,000 of them. So it's going to be buffing things that are undertuned, nerfing some things that are overtuned, adding new zones. Like we have a bunch of plans just to make sure more zones get added, and that there's a better variety of things. But that's going to take time.
Ideally, there's going to be some hard mobs, and you'll fight single mobs, and it will be rewarding versus fighting 10,000 at once and just spamming E.
It is going to be a lot of work and a lot of balancing. There's going to be some changes to, like, on top of the stuff we're talking about now, there's also going to be some economy changes to try and incentivize A, selling loot to people, and B, not just vendoring everything you get. That's one of the problems that we had at the end of the old server, was like everything was so, like, the best zones to farm are the ones that just had really expensive raw value items as far as money went, and you would never ever consider selling those items to a player for the most part because they're so expensive. Like when an item vendors for 8K, it is a very hard ask to try to get someone to buy that. So there's going to be a bunch of stuff moved towards trying to make that a thing.
So is there a difference between, say, a lot of light blues mined off XP versus large, difficult mobs that you have to, like, focus a lot on?
I mean, I guess in what way? Like, as far as
like, let's say we're comparable experience when you just fight, where you could, like, put on some tunes and just, like, lazily XP versus a difficult zone that's balanced, but you have to really think. And
so, like, think about PoE, right? Like, you and I have talked about this a lot, where, like, sometimes you just want to cruise red maps or whatever and just collect a bunch of loot, and sometimes you want to go fight, you want to go do hard content. And, like, the goal would generally be for the hard content to be more rewarding, but the fact that you can just cruise and, rain off is still good enough reason to go do something.
yeah, that's more like 80% map easy farming versus 20% pushing your limits of your character. So
Sure.
you couldn't expect it to be 50-50 from the outset, right?
No, I mean, like, even think about, like, old SOD, where, like, I would say a good portion of my time playing the game was just, like, duoing easy stuff, right? That's I'm going and farming plat, or, like, doing a quest or whatever. Like, that was probably 40% of my playtime. 30% of my playtime was, like, just, sitting in the bottom of MLC, sitting in Red Sun Mines, sitting in First Ruins, whatever, someplace farming, or, doing Merc quests or Refuge quests or whatever, like, all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I don't think it'd be good.
So someone asked about Enchanter base pets. Did Enchanter pets levels on their animations increase at all, or are they increased hit to offset? To offset what? I don't quite understand.
Maybe their hit chance.
Oh, relic placid focus? So we're going to avoid... I'm not against placid focus having endurance regen happening. There's going to be a big balance pass on endurance stuff after launch, where we're going to be adjusting costs, adding endurance regen to stuff, etc., etc. So we're not going to be adding a ton of that stuff right now. We added it to Bliss because it felt really appropriate there. Not Bliss, but Paragon, because it felt really appropriate there. Other stuff is probably going to come as part of that rework.
We're kind of working on endurance currently, right?
Yeah, we started talking about it the other day, started looking at costs and stuff, but that's probably not going to get finished until after launch.
Will they still up with the endurance over time?
We'll see. I'm not going to make promises because I've got a ton to do,
Sure.
and you guys have to do. So Sonar, generally at low tiers, this is so the animation pets up until the ancient were more or less just sort of like, kind of not great damage, and they were just supposed to be like, I can't charm. The ancient one was more, from my understanding, like reading old staff posts. Is the ancient one was mostly supposed to be there to more or less to use the guarding rune as its thing. With the runic one, we're sort of pushing them being a more valuable source of DPS using the AA. I'm not opposed to buffing the ancient one. I wouldn't be super keen on buffing the lower level ones, because at low levels they're actually pretty decent, because they're not actually that much weaker than a mage pet until you get to like the last two or something. So the low level ones being buffed would be kind of a problem, but I wouldn't be opposed to buffing the ancient one. I don't know about how anyone else feels about that. You are correct. It is almost 8. Holy cow.
Oh, dang, dude.
It goes by fast. We did start a little later, right?
Yeah, we started at like 7:06 or something, because tech difficulties are 7:08.
Weirdo.
So yeah.
It does seem there's a warning that we should shut up so we can keep working on the server.
Yeah, that too. I've got to go finish writing account recovery tools. So that people can change their passwords. Okay, so this is a question that I'm going to answer. Historically, unfinished quest lines will be finished at launch. I don't know of any. I think that's not true. I think one. I think there's one. I'm not the person who made it, and the person who made it isn't here, so I'm not going to talk about it. But I think one got done.
There is a second one that I found that I started working on.
I forgot about that, but that's not what I don't even think people know. That one, do people even know it exists?
I don't think so. And I'm not going to
This is very
where it is.
you that there's quests you guys have never heard of that we only find later when we look into other broken things.
Oh yeah, 100%.
How many
So-
quests did you find, Duke?
The one. Talk about the one with the mosquitoes.
Oh, I think we've talked about it a little bit before in chat. But the one where it's the poetess quest. You talk to her about all the things that you've slain, and there's a reward when you kill a certain amount, but you'll never get to that amount, for one thing, and two, when you can get to that amount, I think it was broken to the point where you actually wouldn't get the right dialogue to continue.
That's such a troll right there.
And this is how I started making the Mile D rewards too. It was a quest that could not be completed.
The worst part about those, Duke, is heck, you could have done those reasonably at the tier they're intended to be for. They were actually really nice items. They weren't gonna the game or anything, but for intended as a tier 4 to 5 quest reward, they were really nice.
I can think of one person that played a wizard that would ever go that far to find it, and he would not be happy with the reward that he got.
Oh, that's fair.
What about that secret raid boss in that tower?
Oh, I mean, someone kind of spoiled it earlier about Gorzanath, hard mode, something like that.
Yeah.
Spread shame.
So I have to talk about the test.
Yes.
Because we changed a whole bunch of the back-end core stuff. Your accounts are not, the way your character is saved is more viewable now. It's less corruptible. Yeah, I don't think you could corrupt it, but there's a lot of moving parts that have been altered. With say your inventory, all your characters' data, pet data. So I just want to make sure all of that runs well, and that's in addition to just a new client, right? So groups, PvP, any functionality in the client. I mean, So when I'll have a couple of zones up, and we'll be running them in like a debug mode. So if the zone crashes, we can get like a report. So, and then I know Fidel wanted to see how the server would run just under load, and then everybody can have some peace of mind. If everything goes smoothly, which is the goal, then Juff will keep working because he is amazing at what he does. But I'll take it easy.
We have so much left to do. I'm gonna go have a heart attack right now.
Is it?
So
It's self-inflicted, self-imposed. Which you have such high standards.
yes. One thing to note, we are going to put some low-level spell vendors and guild masters tucked away somewhere in Stinger's Bog, so if you guys want to mess around longer, you can do more, but...
So,
That's
yeah.
actually what are you working on right now?
Yeah, I'll do a patch tomorrow. I got a couple things. I'm actually hanging out with a friend all day, but I'll come home, do the patch, wake up in the morning on Sunday, re-roll the server. I think I'll take a snapshot of the server, like a checkpoint, and then boot the server, shut all the zones down, boot only tutorial B